Who really owns Israel? A lost letter from an ancient ruler claims the land. But history tells a different story. Wars were fought. Empires rose and fell. And yet the question remains unanswered. What if everything we know is not the full truth? The answer is more shocking than you think. Stay with us until the end, because this video will take you deep into the hidden history no one talks about. Watch closely. Every detail matters. The question is not just political. It is not just religious. It is a story of survival, betrayal, prophecy, and destiny. Empires have fought for it. Prophets have walked upon it. And countless lives have been claimed in its name. But if we strip away the wars, the claims, and the centuries of struggle, what remains? The answer is more shocking than you think. And to uncover it, we must journey back, far beyond the modern conflicts, beyond the rise and fall of empires, beyond the very foundation of civilization itself. But let me warn you, this is not just history. This is a mystery woven into time, a puzzle with missing pieces scattered across the ages. To understand the truth, you must stay until the end, because every piece, every moment, every battle, and every promise leads us to a conclusion that no one dares to speak. Stay with me. Because once you hear this story, you will never see Israel the same way again. For thousands of years, one story has defined the land of Israel, a story written in faith, sacrifice, and prophecy. It begins with a man standing alone in the vast wilderness, looking up at the stars. Abraham, a nomadic shepherd, had no kingdom, no army, no land to call his own. And yet, he received a promise from the divine. Imagine what that meant for a man with nothing. The land of Israel was not just a gift, it was a destiny. But that destiny came with a test. Abraham had to leave his home, wander through foreign lands, and even face the unthinkable, the command to sacrifice his own son. He built altars, offered prayers, and endured trials that would have broken most men. But Abraham did not waver. And so, the covenant was sealed, not just in words, but in blood, in faith, in an unbreakable bond that would echo through generations. Yet, despite this divine promise, Abraham never owned the land in his lifetime. He was a foreigner in the land that was meant for his descendants. This raises a question that few dare to ask. If the man to whom the land was promised never fully possessed it, does anyone else truly have a greater claim? Centuries later, Abraham's descendants, now a great nation, stood at the borders of the promised land. But Israel was not empty. The land was home to mighty cities, powerful tribes, and warriors who saw the Israelites as invaders. The conquest of Canaan was fierce. The walls of Jericho fell. Kingdoms were shattered, and the tribes of Israel carved their place into history with their swords. Every battle was a test, every victory a step closer to fulfilling the ancient promise. But the land would not come without struggle. The Israelites faced betrayals, divisions, and moments where they nearly lost everything. Even after they settled, the fight for ownership never truly ended. The Philistines came. The Babylonians followed. And then, the greatest exile of all. One of the most heartbreaking moments in Israel's history came when the Babylonians stormed Jerusalem. The city was set ablaze. The sacred temple was reduced to rubble, and the people of Israel were led away in chains. Imagine the despair. The chosen people, now scattered in a foreign land, torn from the soil their ancestors had bled for. The rivers of Babylon carried their sorrow as they sat by its banks and wept for Zion. For 70 years, they lived in exile. But here's the remarkable part. Most nations, when scattered, disappear into history. They fade, assimilate, and lose their identity. They never forgot. They never stopped believing that one day they would return. And against all odds, they did. The exile ended, and they walked back into the land their ancestors had fought for, rebuilding their city, their faith, and their promise. This is where history takes an unexpected turn. The land of Israel does not obey the laws of conquest. Most territories, once taken by an empire, remain under their rule for generations. But Israel is different. It changes hands, but it never remains with one conqueror for long. The Babylonians, the Persians, the Romans, the Crusaders, the Ottomans, they all claimed it, and yet they all fell. But history is unforgiving. The moment one empire crumbles, another rises to take its place. And so, as the Israelites rebuilt their home, a shadow loomed over them, the unstoppable force of Rome. The year was 70 AD. Jerusalem was burning. The Roman legions, relentless and merciless, crushed the Jewish rebellion. The sacred Second Temple, the heart of Jewish worship, was reduced to ashes. Once again, the people of Israel found themselves in exile. This time, scattered across the vast Roman Empire. For centuries they wandered. From Spain to Persia, from North Africa to Eastern Europe, the Jewish people carried the memory of their lost homeland. But the land of Israel did not remain untouched. A new power emerged, the rise of Islam. With the spread of Islam in the 7th century, the land of Israel came under the rule of Muslim caliphates. Jerusalem became a holy city in Islam, home to the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock. The Jewish presence remained, but they were no longer rulers of their ancestral land. The centuries passed, and another force arose, one that would shake the world. In the 11th century, Christian armies from Europe launched the Crusades, determined to reclaim the Holy Land from Muslim rule. The battles were brutal. Cities were razed, populations massacred, and control of the land shifted violently between Christian and Muslim forces. For nearly 200 years, war raged over Jerusalem. The land changed hands countless times. Blood soaked its soil, yet no conqueror ever held it for long. Then came the Ottomans, the British, and modern conflicts. But what if the truth has been hiding in plain sight? What if ownership was never meant to be decided by war? Stay with us, because in the next section, we uncover the shocking reality that no one dares to speak, the answer that has been buried for centuries. By the early 20th century, the land of Israel was no longer under the rule of ancient empires. The Ottoman Empire, which had controlled it for centuries, collapsed in the aftermath of World War I. In its place, a new power emerged: Britain. And with it came one of the most controversial declarations in modern history. In 1917, British Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour signed a letter that would change the fate of the Middle East forever. The Balfour Declaration stated that Britain supported the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. For the Jewish people, it was a long-awaited recognition of their ancient connection to the land. After centuries of persecution and exile, it seemed like the world was finally acknowledging their right to return. But for the Arab population living in the land, it was a betrayal. How could Britain promise a land already inhabited by others? This single letter set the stage for decades of conflict. Even before the Balfour Declaration, a movement had begun. Zionism, the idea that the Jewish people should return to their ancestral homeland, was gaining momentum. Jewish families, escaping persecution in Europe, began to arrive in waves. They drained swamps, built settlements, and transformed barren land into thriving communities. Tel Aviv was founded. Agricultural kibbutzim flourished. The Jewish dream of return was no longer just a prophecy. It was becoming a reality. But this new wave of migration alarmed the Arab population. They feared displacement, the loss of their lands, and the rise of a Jewish state in their midst. Tensions erupted into violence. Riots broke out. Attacks became frequent. The once peaceful land of Abraham's promise was now a battlefield. Arab leaders saw the Jewish migration as a threat to their own claims to the land. They resisted through political negotiations, protests, and armed uprisings. By the 1930s, clashes between Jews and Arabs had escalated into full-scale violence. Britain, caught between its promise to the Jews and its need to maintain control over the region, struggled to keep the peace. By 1948, the world had changed. The horrors of World War II had exposed the darkest depths of human cruelty. The Holocaust had left millions of Jews homeless, shattered, and desperate for a place they could call their own. And in the heart of the Middle East, that place had always been Israel. On May 14, 1948, David Ben-Gurion stood before a crowd in Tel Aviv and read the words that would alter history forever. "We hereby declare the establishment of a Jewish state in the land of Israel, to be known as the State of Israel." Tears filled the eyes of those who had fought for this moment. Survivors of the Holocaust, refugees from war-torn lands, and dreamers who had longed for Zion all stood together in awe. After 2,000 years, Israel was reborn. But their joy was short-lived. The very next day, 5 Arab nations declared war. Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Iraq, and Lebanon launched an all-out attack, determined to crush Israel before it could even stand. Outnumbered and outgunned, Israel fought back. They defended their new homeland with everything they had. Farmers became soldiers, students became fighters, and the dream of Zion was defended with blood and sacrifice. And then, against all odds, Israel won. The war ended, but the battle over ownership had just begun. The United Nations had proposed a partition plan that divided the land between Jews and Arabs, but the Arab states rejected it. They refused to recognize Israel's right to exist. Borders were drawn and redrawn. Jerusalem, the heart of it all, became a divided city. Wars followed. 1956, 1967, 1973, each one shaping the future of the region. But through it all, one question remained. Who had the legal right to the land? Was it the Jewish people returning to their ancient homeland after centuries of exile? Was it the Arab Palestinians who had lived on the land for generations? Or was it a matter far beyond politics and war? Something deeper, something written in prophecy, something that could not be decided by armies or governments. The truth is more complex than anyone wants to admit, and in the next chapter, we will uncover the most shocking part of this story. Because the fight for Israel is far from over. The battle for Israel did not end with ancient wars or biblical prophecies. In fact, the debate over who truly owns the land has only grown more complex. It is no longer just a matter of history. It is a matter of survival, identity, and deeply rooted beliefs. Oh, the Israeli people, the land of Israel is their ancestral home, a place given to them by divine covenant and secured through centuries of struggle. They see themselves not as conquerors, but as returnees, people who have come back to the land that was always theirs. For Palestinians, however, Israel is their homeland as well, a place where their ancestors lived for generations before the establishment of the modern Israeli state. They see the creation of Israel as a moment of loss, an event that displaced thousands and left many in exile. Both sides claim history, pain, and justice, and neither is willing to let go. The question of ownership is not just about politics, it is about faith. For Jews, Israel is not just a country. It is the fulfillment of biblical prophecy. The city of Jerusalem in particular holds an unmatched spiritual significance. For Muslims, Jerusalem is also sacred, home to Al-Aqsa Mosque, one of Islam's holiest sites. This religious connection fuels the Palestinian claim to the land, making the conflict not just about borders, but about faith itself. Can faith alone determine ownership? Or is it the shifting sands of politics that truly decide? Over the years, documents have surfaced, some hidden, some forgotten, that reveal agreements and betrayals few talk about. Old treaties, colonial mandates, and secret deals made behind closed doors have shaped the borders of modern Israel in ways the world barely understands. Who really owns Israel? The answer is more than just a name on a deed, more than an ancient prophecy, and more than a political promise. The land itself carries a story still being written today. And the final chapter has yet to be told. So, after all these centuries, all the wars, and all the sacrifices, who truly owns Israel? Ownership is not just about borders on a map. It is not about legal papers or ancient texts alone. Ownership is about connection, about belief, about the stories passed from generation to generation. Every stone in Israel has a story. Every mountain has seen empires rise and fall. And every river has carried the tears of those who long to call it home. Perhaps the real answer is this: Israel does not belong to one people alone. It belongs to history itself. It belongs to those who cherish it, to those who fight for it, to those who see it as more than just land, but as a sacred promise. And so, we are left with one final question. Does anyone truly own Israel? Or is Israel a land that owns those who dare to claim it? This story is far from over. The land remains, as it always has, at the center of prophecy, politics, and passion. What happens next? That is a chapter yet to be written. If you found this journey through time fascinating, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more untold stories. Like this video to support deep historical storytelling. And most importantly, watch till the very end, because every detail matters in understanding the truth.